Samsung's tablets always seem to be glossed over a little in the media cycle. And I don't think you can just blame the media for that. I think it also has to do with Samsung not seeming to care as much about their tablets as they do their phones. And kind of makes sense. Samsung sells a lot more phones than they do tablets. But would it come as a surprise if I told you that Samsung actually sells more tablets in the United States than Nokia or OnePlus sells phones? Now granted, those manufacturers don't have a massive slice of the US phone market, but I definitely see a lot more coverage of OnePlus than I do of Samsung tablets. This is the Galaxy Tab S7 Plus, Samsung's most recent and highest end tablet, with all of the bells and whistles to be an absolutely premium tablet. But is it worth its massive asking price? This is InnoIso, and this is my review of the Galaxy Tab S7 Plus. At the beginning of the year, when the Tab S7 started showing up in leaks, many, including myself, said it really looked like an iPad Pro clone. And generally I can say that I was wrong. While the squared off edges and aluminum frame might give similar vibes to the iPad Pro, this tablet looks very different than the iPad Pro side by side. This is really meant to be viewed in horizontal orientation rather than the vertical orientation that the iPad Pro is designed in. And generally, it looks excellent. My last Galaxy Tab, which was the Tab S4, had a glass back, which was very difficult to hold without it sliding out of your hands. But the aluminum here is a lot easier to grasp onto, which is great because this is a very large tablet. Now, notably, the Tab S7 Plus is the larger model out of the two. And so if you want something more handheld, you might want to opt for the Tab S7 instead. But this is meant to be more of a convertible type device, and therefore it's more shaped like a laptop screen would be, relative to the iPad Pro, which is a more square design. The optional keyboard cover and kickstand cost an additional $229, which is absolutely ludicrous and way too much for an accessory. But we'll get into detail on whether I think it's worth it later. Now, from a design standpoint, I think the keyboard is okay. It's got a kind of leathery plastic feel that seems more durable than the iPad Pro's Magic Keyboard, but it doesn't feel nearly as premium as some others, like the Surface type cover. On the other hand, the kickstand that attaches magnetically to the back of the Tab S7 is my favorite accessory to any tablet ever. You see, I think a kickstand should be included on every single tablet out there, especially considering all tablets are now pushing themselves to be 2-in-1s, and so they're frequently in laptop position like this. And even without the keyboard cover, I would probably pay an additional $100 for this kickstand alone, because it would be really nice, and is really nice, to set this up anywhere around the house to watch videos without having to worry about finding something to prop it up against. The kickstand cover also solves another issue that I have with the Tab S7 Plus, and that's the fact that it hides the pen. And while it is convenient that the pen can charge against the back of your device right here, the magnets are in no way strong enough to keep the pen there. And so if you threw this tablet into a bag without the included accessory, then your pen will absolutely end up lost somewhere else in your bag. And so really being able to close it away with the cover makes it a lot more convenient. It shouldn't shock you to hear that the display on the Tab S7 Plus is absolutely incredible. It's bright, it's punchy, it's got great colors, it's sharp and high resolution, and most importantly, it's 120 Hz. Now, I've said in the past that I really can't distinguish 120 Hz from 60 Hz or 90 Hz on most smartphone displays, but generally when I was using the Tab S7 Plus, I did feel that it was more fluid compared to some other tablets, like the Surface Pro X that I recently reviewed. Now, I know that a lot of people on the internet have said that a taller aspect ratio is better for productivity, but I think the Tab S7's wider aspect ratio is a lot better for media consumption, because most of the content that I still watch is in 16:9 aspect ratio, and so it fits better on the 16:10 aspect ratio of the Tab S7 Plus rather than the iPad Pro. For tablet usage, the Snapdragon 865 processor in the S7 Plus is more than enough to navigate the 120 Hz display, have great experiences gaming or watching movies or navigating social media or sending emails, most things that you would do on a traditional tablet. And for me, the battery life is absolutely excellent. Now, Battery life on a tablet matters less for long stretches of time for me, but instead being able to pick the tablet up several days after I used it and still having a lot of battery left. Now, I could consistently use the Tab S7 for a week, using maybe an hour or two a day, and I would still have battery left over at the end of the week. For software, if like me, you spend most of the time on the Galaxy Tab S7 Plus, browsing social media, YouTube, Spotify, or those sort of apps in single screen formats, then the Tab S7 Plus will feel very much like a big screen Note. Now, I will say that One UI doesn't really look nearly as good when blown up to this large screen and flipped sideways, and I think the home screen looks a little bit cartoonish on this big of a display. But I generally don't think Apple or Microsoft has figured out how to make a good home screen for tablets either, so we'll give Samsung a break. Now, it was only when I remembered that this is in fact a multitasking capable device that the experience started to sour for me. Now, Samsung does allow you to open apps on either side of the display, but the way you go about it is kind of weird. You see, Samsung has a couple of options for opening multiple apps at a time, and they're not very intuitive. In order to open most apps in side-by-side view, you first need to open up your first app and then drag out this little sidebar, select your second app, and drag it onto the screen. And while this seems to be an alright experience, there's no option to actually start out by opening an app in one side of the display. And in addition to that, once you then go to the home screen from one of your apps, you're then forced to reset up your apps rather than having them already ready for you in side-by-side position. It makes very little sense to me how Windows 10, of all things, can have a better tablet experience of viewing apps side-by-side than One UI. Now, this is a big reason why I don't find myself multitasking too much on the Tab S7 Plus, but there's one more reason for that. I've been wanting to review Samsung's DeX for a really long time, but haven't really found a good opportunity to do so. If you don't know, Samsung's DeX is their desktop experience, which basically emulates the feeling of using a traditional laptop or desktop. The reason why I haven't reviewed DeX up until this point is, while it does come on the Galaxy S20 or Note 20 Ultra or most Samsung flagships, it really doesn't represent a core focus of the experience of using those devices. Whereas with the Tab S7 Plus, it is a very large portion of the experience designed for this tablet. I could spend an entire 30-minute video talking about all of my frustrations that I had when using DeX, but I'll try and sum it up into a couple key points. Now, first of all, the visual design of DeX is excellent. I'm personally very familiar with using Windows devices, and DeX gets very close to emulating a lot of the experience that you have navigating Windows desktops. But unfortunately, that beauty is only skin deep. Now, Samsung has to deal with the issue that many developers don't support being able to easily scale between a smartphone format and a tablet format in their applications. And so you're often forced into only looking at the size of a smartphone screen, even though you have a massive tablet screen available. I often found when using DeX that I would opt for the browser version of an application rather than the actual app on the tablet. And the reason was typically the design or the functionality of the browser version was more suited for this type of screen or a keyboard and trackpad experience than the app itself. Some examples of this are YouTube, eBay, or Twitter, which I found I always preferred using the browser than the app itself, at least when in DeX mode. Now, several websites unfortunately recognize the Tab S7 in DeX mode as a phone or a tablet rather than a laptop, and so you get the mobile browsing experience, which is a real bummer. But the general theme of using DeX is inconsistency. While you'll find some applications do scale well to the large tablet, and browsing the internet sometimes can be very enjoyable, I will say that many applications just either don't work, or don't look very good, or just don't have the full set of features that I'd expect out of a more tablet or laptop operating system. A perfect example for me is Onenote, which is the primary app that I use to take notes. In DeX, it is an actually very poor experience, and it looks just like a blown-up version of a smartphone app. This is especially notable because the iPad version of Onenote actually has quite a bit more features, And while it's not in feature parity with the Windows version, it is substantially better than the mobile version that you get on DeX. And while I found that the performance on DeX was substantially better than it has been in the past, I don't think I would consider replacing my laptop with this. Since Samsung is selling this as a 2-in-1 device, I need to review both the keyboard and the trackpad like I would for a traditional laptop. Now, I need to say that this is absolutely not worth the $229 asking price, especially when Microsoft sells their type covers for $130. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad experience. Now, the keyboard has enough travel, and while the keys feel a little bit mushy, there's a lot of similarities to earlier Samsung 2-in-1s that I didn't really mind the experience. It generally gives you okay feedback, but it feels a little bit too stiff for me. Thankfully, Samsung makes up for that fact because it has an almost completely traditional layout. I love the fact that I have traditional F keys in addition to the function keys on the top of the device. That is a huge plus that this has over any iPad keyboard that I've used. On the other hand, the trackpad here is a huge letdown. While I found the experience to be kind of smooth and responsive, I found that too often when I was trying to click into a certain app in DeX mode, it wouldn't work properly, and so instead I had to tap on the trackpad rather than clicking down. I don't know exactly why this happened, but it made the experience incredibly poor. In addition, the scrolling performance on this is very poor. While you can scroll with 2-finger swipe like you could with most other laptops, unfortunately, there's this odd jitter where it jumps back a little bit while you're trying to scroll down or jumps forward a little bit when you're trying to scroll up. And I don't know why it happens, but the acceleration just feels incredibly off. And the biggest negative review that I could give to a trackpad is if instead I always opt for scrolling on the screen rather than the trackpad itself, and I found myself doing that on this way too often. A couple more things to address before wrapping up. First, the in-screen fingerprint sensor on the Tab S7 Plus is excellent. I didn't find it nearly to be as futuristic as the experience of using Face ID on the iPad Pro or using Windows Hello on a Surface device, but it was still fast enough and accurate enough that I didn't mind it. Samsung's S Pen does make an appearance here, and generally it works like any S Pen on any Note device. Now, while I do consider myself to be a power user, I didn't find myself using the air gestures on this S Pen because I found them to be inconsistent and not really very intuitive. But generally, the S Pen works very seamlessly, it's smooth, it's responsive, and it's got a pretty good writing and drawing experience. What I like about it is lightweight, but one disappointment is when I first saw it, it appeared to be flatter than it was, more similar to Surface Slim Pen, the new pen that you can get for the Surface Pro X. And unfortunately, it's kind of crappy and cheap feeling. It feels very lightweight, and it feels like if I accidentally sat on it, it would break in half. And that's just a big contrast to what I experience on Surface Pens or the Apple Pencil. The only saving grace for me is the S Pen is free, which is nice because I would frankly not drop a lot of money for this anyways. But I do imagine if you are a student wanting to take notes, it would be an incredible experience just using the S Pen to take notes in an app like OneNote. So I can say that the experience of using the Tab S7 Plus as a 2-in-1 are not great. But the Tab S7 Plus is a tablet, and as a tablet, I would argue that it's pretty incredible. It's got a great display, great speakers, the stylus is pretty good, and for most purposes, including watching YouTube and Netflix and browsing social media and just browsing the internet, I think the Tab S7 Plus is quite excellent. And while I couldn't replace my laptop with it, I don't want to replace my laptop with it. My laptop is perfectly good at what it does, and the Tab S7 Plus is perfectly good as something else. While Apple, Microsoft, and Samsung seem to be pushing this idea of replacing your laptop with a tablet, it's not something that I necessarily need to do. And really, I want a tablet that has a good tablet experience that doesn't sacrifice that experience for a better 2-in-1 experience. And in many ways, I think the Samsung Galaxy Tab S7 Plus is excellent at doing just that. Now granted, there are a lot cheaper options for getting tablets that don't have the 2-in-1 features, but I would say that the Tab S7 Plus is the best of the best, even though it is pretty expensive. Pretty soon here I'll be doing a full comparison between the Samsung Galaxy Tab S7 Plus, the iPad Pro 12.9 inch, and the Microsoft Surface Pro X. So be sure to get subscribed and let me know down in the comments which you think is going to win. If you like this video, be sure to throw a like on it, and I'll catch you in the next one.